How's everybody doing? Thank you so much for joining these live streams. I do enjoy them. I don't enjoy setting them up. For some reason, it's just never like turn on and go. But we're here. We made it. I saw several comments of people saying, hey, I really enjoyed when you were doing the flesh and blood streams when you were just editing. And I'm starting a new feature now, which is something that was shot in Germany, actually. Director that I met through South by earlier this year. And we had a couple of meetings. He filmed pretty big film in the state in Germany. And we just met last week. He flew over. We looked at the footage, and I'm starting to cut this now. And he's really excited about the opportunity that I could potentially cut some of those scenes on the channel, or more so even on Patreon. If you're really interested in the process of just seeing me cut actual films, not just YouTube videos, I'm going to bring that back on Patreon. Just a heads up. So I also noticed that in that poll where I asked you what are the rewards that you as a patron really enjoy, that you picked an editing course. And that's something that I was aware of before, and it's something that I'm working on. And yesterday I was filming all day with Steve and Vinny, who are helping me create an editing course. And this was our last day that we were filming. It was, I think, a total of 5 days that we did over the course of the last couple of months, where we filmed different modules of an editing course that will be coming soon. And it is storytelling, but it's more so also about what you can do to set yourself apart as an editor. So this course will be structured around that idea of what it takes to become one of those go-to editors. And then I'm going to think about a way, and maybe you have a suggestion of how we can also maybe beta test that course on Patreon. I really am interested to make Patreon a platform where you get a lot of worthwhile benefits. I appreciate that you're spending a monthly token to support the channel, but I think it should really be about it's worth your time. There's a couple of questions that I got on Patreon, one specifically from Betty, and she was very interested in getting more of an idea how a pro editor structures their projects. So Betty says, I'm using Premiere Pro. Can you steer me in the direction of how to set up my timeline? I'm editing so many scenes just out of lack of patience with my learning that I'd like to learn how to do it correctly. To answer your question, first of all, there is no one way of organizing your footage and working within whatever editing software you do. Doing a little cutting here and there, and it's fine to do that at any time. Like do it at the beginning, play a little bit around, get a feel for a scene, set the bar, the tone, figure some things out. But having a really organized way of how you're going to watch your footage and take note how you actually feel about it. And that's the job of an editor. We're the ambassador of the audience. So we're supposed to watch it, and we need to somehow take note in that moment how we feel about it so that we can start planning how it's all going to come together at the end. What I like to do, depending on the software, in Premiere Pro, I definitely do select reels. So I go through a shoot, I watch everything, and as I'm watching it, I'll throw it in a timeline. And I'll try to divide it by moment or shot by shot. And each shot, I'm already making an assessment how I feel about it without even having a plan yet how I'm going to utilize this in a scene. So each moment I'll throw in the timeline. If it's something that's happened and it's usable, it's on video layer 1. If it's something that I like, it's on video layer 2. And if it's something that I love, that is gold, those gold moments I'll put on video layer 3. So what I end up doing is I'm stacking all these shots in a horizontal way. So I have a chronological rendition of how the scene played out, and I have an emotional assessment the first time that I saw it that I can always go back to. And what I love about the system is that I can go back months later and still remember how I felt the first time I saw the footage, which is key because as you're cutting scenes, you're going to lose this enthusiasm or this instinct of what works as you're sort of getting really stuck on something. Once you've done the selecting, do a cutting of a scene and just cut it the way that it would work on its own. And then just start throwing these into a timeline. Misho, the editor of the documentary The Square, he calls that the heavy lifting. So this is the most painful part where you're just trying to fill every blank space in the timeline. And I know with Kenneth, I always keep pushing you to just put slates in there. If you don't know, if you don't have the footage yet, you haven't worked with it, just throw a slate in there of what's going to be there. Quick note, okay, this is the scene where I get out of the train and walk over to the apartment. And then put the next scene there that you already cut, put another slate for a scene that you're about to cut or about to shoot, and it starts to make sense. Okay, that's my answer for Betty, but I'm going to also send you an email just in case. All right, if you joined us, I can see a couple more people are here. Thank you so much for being here. Always enjoy these live streams. Do introduce yourself in the chat room. I'm going to take a look right now because I asked Diana to talk a little bit about what she's up to. And she writes, I'm an editor who changed careers about 10 years ago from being a magazine art director. Just started freelancing full-time a few months ago, so taking all kinds of editing work right now, but most interested in narrative work. Yeah, I mean, narrative is where it's at, right? We want to be cutting features. Working on a short narrative right now and recently finished 2 mini docs. That's awesome. Now you've worked with documentary and narrative. Diana, what's the difference between the two as an editor? Like, how is the storytelling different, or your creative power, I want to say, like your contribution in your view? How do you see that? Hey, Ross, how are you? We've been talking with each other over Discord for a while. I really appreciate Ross is going to take another stab at a video that I've been slacking on, which is the one about Russian montage editing. It's the second part of that sort of crash course that I did with Tyler a few months back. I just sent Ross the footage, and I think on Friday you're sending me a cut, so I'm excited to see that. Diana continues, I feel like the storytelling is much the same between doc and narrative, but with docs, the editor has to find the story through the footage, whereas with narrative, you already got it in the script. That's right. The writing part is much more happening in the editing when it comes to documentary. And that's one of the reasons why I love working with documentaries is I feel like my creativity is fully utilized. I feel like I can really plan and create the story. They're still exciting to cut a feature, especially if you have great actors and like a great script. That's the most amazing thing. I wish like that's all I would love to do is like have great actors say amazing lines and just putting that together. All right. I got an email from Charles a while back. I'm just going to read this and then I'm going to ask you what Charles should do. So he writes, I'm one of those unfortunate people who, despite having a love for film and crafting narratives, whether that be writing, editing, and so on, I grew up believing that these weren't necessarily real jobs. So after working in the mortgage industry for a few years, I went back to school, got a BA in literary studies, sorry, and then for some unknown reason, a master of architecture. Clearly, I make poor decisions when it comes to choosing majors. Depends. In your opinion, what other disciplines might people have practiced or studied that would benefit to being an editor? And how might they best go about incorporating these unrelated skills? What do you think? Let me know. What is it about like having, I want to say, life experience in other fields and how that could be helpful for being a filmmaker or a storyteller in general? I think that's a really interesting question. And for me, it's something that I sometimes think about because my whole life was basically always about making films. When I finished high school, I kind of already knew that I wanted to be a filmmaker, and every job that I took was somewhat related to the industry. Did an internship at an ad agency, worked at a marketing department of a car company in advertising. I did an internship at a newspaper, and then basically went to film school in Germany, and then later here in America at the American Film Institute in Los Angeles, and just kept working in the industry. If you have an answer for Charles, like what are other disciplines that can be helpful for filmmaking? Or is it like being an architect? Is that helpful in any way to being an editor? Do let me know. I'm going to start giving you my answer, and I think it can be really helpful because there's something about creating a building and creating a film that's very similar, right? You have an idea, you have a vision of what this building is supposed to look like, and you have certain requirements of what that building is supposed to function as. And I think these are somewhat similar concepts, and just going through the motions of how do you work, how do you make a plan, how do you build a model, the process is very similar. So that's number one. I think if you do anything on a like a executive level, where I mean like you actually have to use your brain to make some creative decisions, that's going to be helpful for filmmaking. The other thing I think is more importantly is we're trying to be storytellers, and that's the hardest challenge. It's not actually the editing that's hard, it's the finding the story and telling it, figuring out a way how you can engage an audience. And that is a lifelong journey. If you have life experience, especially if you worked in other fields, that can only benefit you. To be honest, it took me a long time, and I still feel like I haven't mastered it at all, is the storytelling aspect. Like I walked out of AFI just being confused about what a story is. Like we were shooting films and they were just trying to really make us understand that working on the script is the most important part, and figuring out what these characters want and throw every obstacle in their way to for them to realize what they want is not necessarily what they need. What's really important about editing is you have to do it. And that's why I have this t-shirt, just edit. That's my advice. So if you're starting late and you have other experiences, first of all, bring those experiences to the table, because the stories that you're telling become interesting because of who you are and how you what is your take. Every story has been told. What's interesting is how you tell it. And if you're an architect, you have something to say about something that I know nothing about. So bring that to your craft, number one. And number two, just freaking work and find ways to cut stuff. If you're a patron, you have access to the dailies of that scene. If you haven't cut that scene yet from the ever after, then that's an opportunity for you to cut a scene, spend a week on that, and put it up there, put it in a Discord group so people can take a look at it and give you some feedback. And then you've gone full circle on that. And once you've done that, find something else to do. Go full circle again. It's important to have something that an audience can watch and give you feedback on. And if the feedback is no interest, that's also very telling. Charles says, "Oh, Charles is there. Hey, how are you?" Thankfully, storytelling is something I've always found easier than the rest. I'm a published writer as well, and have gotten to the finals of a couple of screenwriting competitions too. Good for you. I mean, great. That's for me, it's super hard. That's why I love editing. It's like that's easy for me. But this is maybe how I'm going to end this video. I am working on a video, and I'm going to let you know what this is. And I'd be curious to see if you've, first of all, seen the movie. Have you heard of the film Margaret by Kenneth Lonergan? Let me know. He has directed Manchester by the Sea. And that's how I learned about this film, and like this almost mythical disaster editing story behind the film. I was doing some research on Manchester by the Sea, and I think it was Jennifer Lame is the editor. And she was talking about that she really wanted to work with the director because she had seen Margaret. So then I look around and I see, wait, there are like two versions of the film. There's like a 3-hour version and a and a half-hour version. Let me just go right to the 3-hour version. And I loved it. I thought it was amazing. And then I started researching why there are different versions out there. And it turns out that this film was stuck in editing for 5 years, 7 years, something like that, where the director and the studio just could not see eye to eye, and he wanted it to be longer, and the studio contractually had obligated him to stay within a certain time frame, and he just refused, and they were battling each other. There was a version that Martin Scorsese and Thelma Schoonmaker apparently cut that is slightly longer than the 2.5 hour studio version that Kenneth apparently signed off on, but the studio still wouldn't release it. And then after the film was released, and it was just a disaster. Like the film just died in theaters, made like $50,000, I think, because the studio just didn't care. They just dumped it. And then he went back apparently and then did the film. That's the first version that I saw, and I loved it. And the director, actually does say that he's still not happy with the film. There's still a lot of tweaks he would make. It's probably the film that's the least finished of all the ones he's done. So I'm doing a video right now where I'm just lining up both versions of the film, and I want to see what the changes are, and want to identify what it is that really like made that film work. I haven't really seen the studio film yet. I just refuse until I like line them up to see how they work, and see if there's something that can be gleaned from that for editing in general. Like when can you like just destroy a film? If there's like any takeaways, I think that'd be really cool to find out. That's what's coming next on the channel. Okay, there's some people responding to this. Let's see. So Nostalgic Norden already said make sure to see the 3-hour version. Have you seen the 2.5 hour version, and does it suck? Todd also says, I just found the extended version on Prime. Gonna watch it. Nostalgic Norden says there's a video where Lonergan talks about the editing of a scene from that film somewhere on YouTube. I'll see if I find it. Yeah, please send it to me. Mark Maron did a podcast with Kenneth where they talk a little bit about the film as well, and you can sense that he's kind of over it, but he's also kind of bitter about the process. Which, of course, 7 years of struggling, that's huge. That's a long time for a movie. And then he turns around and makes Manchester by the Sea, which is kind of a job for hire that he did, and it's just his stock goes up. He wins an Oscar, I believe, for that film. Diana says, "Yeah, wow, sounds very cool and ambitious. It is, but I don't know. I mean, it's not a film that is really on the radar of a lot of people, and I think it would have like I would assume, or I wouldn't be surprised if it would have gotten Oscar nominations if they would make the movie and then release it, put the marketing behind it, yada yada yada. I think like Anna Paquin is the star in it, and I think it's one of her best movies she's done. And didn't she already win an Oscar for Piano? All right, so that's where we're at. Rian Johnson called the movie a masterpiece. Well, so that's what made me seek it out. Good. Well, Rian Johnson did a small movie called Brick, which I highly recommend. It's great. It's with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. It's like a modern day film noir. It's awesome. I have not seen Roma yet, but I hear it's amazing, and you need to see it on a big screen, somebody told me. So don't see it on your laptop. And that's that. So thank you again. Hope you're having a great Sunday. We'll see each other again probably in February. And hopefully then there won't be any technical problems. Like it seemed like a smooth stream, but getting there is always a pain. So thank you, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.